Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode as I take you back to the 20th century in Fenwood, Saskatchewan. The Petlock Murders. On the morning of Tuesday, August 30th, 1955, Nellie Petlock was anxious because her husband, John Petlock, was missing. He had gone to work on his mother's farm the afternoon before, around 3 p.m., to do some stooking, a method of gathering grain, but he never came home. Worried, Nellie and a neighbor walked to the family home where her mother-in-law, Mary Petlock, lived with her brother-in-law, Mike, and his family to see if John was there. When they arrived, however, they found all the doors locked and the blinds drawn. This alarmed Nellie, so she returned to Fenwood and called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, in Melville to report her husband's disappearance. Sergeant Miner, the officer in charge of the local detachment, received the call and drove to Fenwood by about 2:30 p.m. He went directly to Mary Petlock's farm and found it abandoned, just as Nellie had described. The cows hadn't been milked, and the house was locked up tight. Concerned, he returned to Fenwood, called for 2 more officers, and arranged for a police dog to assist with the search. He made some inquiries about the family and then went to visit John's brother, Ed Not Petlock, to check if anyone was there. Sergeant Miner returned to the Petlock farm and found Constable D.R. Murray and D. Johnson already waiting. As they began looking around, the family dog became restless. Along with the police dog, it led the officers to the garden, where they made a shocking discovery. They took Sergeant Miner to a garden plot near the house, where they found the bodies of 2 women covered with potato tops. The first body was that of a young woman lying on her side. She had a bullet wound under her left armpit and blood on her face. This was Angeline Petlock, Mike's wife. About 10 yards away, in a similar position, was Mary Petlock's body, which had 2 bullet holes. There were no signs of a struggle in the garden, but nearby, resting on a bag of potatoes, was a small girl's coat, and next to it lay a doll. It appeared that the woman had been digging up potatoes when they were shot. Their hands were dirty, and there was a half-filled pail close by. After leaving the constable to guard the scene, Sergeant Miner returned to Fenwood to notify his superiors. He then took Lloyd Taylor, who owned a garage, back with him to help him identify the bodies. When they got back, they forced open a kitchen window with a steel bar, and Sergeant Miner climbed in to unlock the kitchen door. Inside, he found Mike Petlock's body lying face down on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood. Next to him were his cap and his lunch pail, and his body was sprawled with 1 foot caught on a kitchen chair. His pockets had been turned out, and a wallet containing only his ID and a few papers was beside him. A chair lay on its side near the door and window, with a heel print on it, and the leftover butt of a hand-rolled cigarette on the seat. Beneath the table, they discovered 2 spent .22 caliber bullet casings. There were no signs of a struggle in the kitchen, aside from the blood from Mike's body. Sergeant Miner then checked the ground floor bedroom, where he found the body of a tiny blonde girl named Micheline, who was less than a year old. She lay in a blood-soaked crib, covered with a sheet, with 1 little hand sticking out. In another room, they found 3-year-old Deanne laying on the bed beneath a feather tick. There was very little blood on her. As they continued the search of the house, they noticed that in Mary's rooms, clothes were strewn everywhere, making it difficult to walk. They found a blood-stained man's shirt in one room and a syrup pail that had been hiding Mary's life savings, but it was empty. By midnight, there were 11 police officers on the scene, yet John Petlock was still missing. The next day, the RCMP used an airplane from Regina to search the area, but there was no sign of him anywhere. On August 30th, 1955, a young man named Albert Daniels and his sister, Miss Eva Bruce, found a .22 caliber rifle in a roadside ditch on Highway number 10, near Balcarres. This rifle was believed to be the murder weapon. After testing it, authorities confirmed that the markings on cartridge cases from the rifle matched those found at the crime scene where the Petlock family was murdered. The bodies of the Petlock family were left on the farm until the afternoon of August 31st. Earlier that day, police allowed family members, neighbors, and reporters to walk around the barnyard, though they were kept out of the garden and the house. From the front steps of the house, people could see the patterns on the print dress of the two women victims laying by the sacks of potatoes they had been filling. When two neighborhood women wandered into the yard and saw the bodies, they became very upset, noticing the chickens scratching in the dirt just 30 feet away. But where was John Petlock? His absence raised suspicion, but it was also possible that he had become another victim. The police sent out a description of him to detachments across the province and the borders, as well as to newspapers. John was described as 36 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing about 140 pounds, with fair hair, a slim build, glasses, and noticeable front teeth. He was last seen wearing blue jeans, a grey shirt, and a beige peak cap. Authorities believed he might be driving a 1953 metallic green Meteor. Neighbors described him as a quiet and humble man. Reports of possible sightings of John flooded in. A clerk at a variety store in Regina claimed that John had rushed into the store around 12:30 p.m. on August 30th, quickly buying a change of clothes. Several men matching his description were picked up by the police, but they were cleared of suspicion. One man from Regina was checked 3 times. The police also had officers looking for him in Vancouver and Winnipeg, where he had relatives and knew the areas well. Throughout this time, the police reassured the public that they only wanted to question John and that no arrest warrant had been issued. The metallic green Meteor that belonged to Mike Petlock was found parked on a street in Regina on the morning of August 31st. Residents noticed it had been there since at least the previous day and called the police. They confirmed John was still alive when a cab driver recognized him from a newspaper photo. He had driven John from Moose Jaw to Saskatoon on the evening of August 29th. John Petlock was eventually caught on September 5th at a rooming house in downtown Edmonton. He surrendered without a fight. His landlady, Miss A. Coughlin, had grown suspicious because he rarely left his room and made it hard for her to see him clearly. Noticing he didn't have any luggage, she decided to contact the RCMP, believing her tenant was the wanted man. He was arrested when he left the rooming house later that day. When asked if he was John Petlock, he readily confirmed it. Corporal W. M. Peterson from the Criminal Investigation Branch in Edmonton interviewed him and took his statement. Sergeant F. B. Weeks also came to get John. They flew him from Saskatoon and then on to Yorkton, where he appeared before a magistrate to face charges. He was held in a cell at the Yorkton courthouse until he could be moved to the Regina jail for a preliminary hearing. According to John's surviving siblings, everything in the family was fine until their father, Harry Petlock, passed away on February 3rd, 1955. Harry was careful with money and didn't trust banks, so he kept his savings at home. After his death, their mother continued this practice and kept nearly $12,000 in a syrup pail. That's roughly 145,000 US dollars today. The couple had several children, 2 daughters, Miss Katie Sherko and Miss Annie Skovmos, and 5 sons, Ednot, John, Mike, Walter, who lived in Winnipeg, and Peter, who lived in Vancouver. In the fall of 1952, John was invited by his father to return to the family farm after spending 10 years working on various farms and in lumber camps across Canada. This invitation came after an argument between Harry and Mike, who had been living on the farm with his family. After the argument, Mike left, and John moved back home. He helped on the farm, bought cattle with his savings, and farmed a quarter section given to him by his father. In November 1954, John married Nellie, who then moved to the farm with him. After Harry Petlock passed away, family arguments started to arise. According to John's sister, Katie, conflicts often erupted between John and their mother, especially after Mike and Angeline visited. She mentioned that John and Mike could not get along. In May 1955, John and his wife moved to their own home in Fenwood. By June, Mike and his family had moved back in with their 70-year-old mother, Mary. When John left, he took with him some livestock, a tractor, 2 pigs, 2 horses, some farming tools, and other equipment. Shortly after, Mary began a lawsuit to reclaim some of those items. Tensions were high between Mary and Mike, too. She complained that he spent too much time away from the farm and took expensive trips to Melville. During one family gathering, Mike and Mary even got into an argument when she tried to get him to leave the room. When Katie arrived, Mike greeted her by asking if she had come for more of the family's property. It seemed that Harry's death had sparked disputes over inheritance. Ednot Petlock believed the disagreements were caused by John's request for either his mother's farm or a gift of $5,000, both of which she refused. Ednot claimed that John thought he had received less than his brothers from their father's estate. After the discovery of the bodies, a coroner's inquest was held, paused while police finished their investigation and arrested John. A preliminary hearing took place at the Melville Legion Hall. During this hearing, some details about John's actions after the murders were revealed by 3 cab drivers who testified. One driver, James Hazlitt, said John hired him to drive from Regina to Moose Jaw on the evening of August 29th, saying he needed to go for work. Later that evening, another driver named James Key was approached by John in Moose Jaw. John asked for a ride to Saskatoon and mentioned his brother had died, which made him anxious to get there quickly. During the ride, he changed clothes and explained he had been working on farms and needed to clean up because he was dirty. They arrived in Saskatoon around 2 a.m. on August 30th. Key dropped John off at the CNR depot, but it was closed, so another cab driver suggested he try the bus depot. Finding no luck there, John rented a room from Alvina Peters at 528 2nd Avenue North in Saskatoon. He told her his name was Art Redcliffe and that he had just had an appendix operation and needed to rest for 2 weeks. However, he stayed only 1 night and then hired R.J. Hagan to drive him to North Battleford. During their drive, John asked Hagan to turn off the radio because he found a soap opera irritating. This made John smile and laugh, showing a different side of him. John Petlock was eventually determined to stand trial and was sent to the common jail in Prince Albert while awaiting his court date. The trial began on March 6, 1954, in Melville with Justice Thompson presiding. John pleaded not guilty. The prosecution only charged him with the murder of Mike, believing they had strong evidence for that accusation. They had not made it clear if they intended to charge him with the other murders later or if they planned to only pursue the murder of Mike. The prosecution's case was simple. They stated that on the morning of the murders, John had gone to see his lawyer regarding a legal matter between him and his mother, who wanted the return of a granary John owned. He visited the lawyer's office at 12:45 p.m. and left shortly after 1 p.m. By around 3 p.m., he arrived at his mother's farm, supposedly to work on the grain. William Romanek, who worked near Fenwood, testified that Mike had come home from work at 5 p.m. that day, but had not returned from work the next day. William thought Mike might have taken a day off for farming. Dr. W. H. Houston, a pathologist, performed autopsies on the victims. He found that Mary had been shot 3 times in her right chest and once in her left, and had a wound on her right hand. Angeline died from severe bleeding caused by a heart vessel being ruptured from gunshot wounds to her left chest and shoulder, along with a shot in the back. 3-year-old Diane had gunshot wounds in her left chest and right back, while 11-month-old Micheline was shot twice in the chest and once in the back. Mike, the last to die, had 4 wounds. 1 in his right elbow, 1 above his right ear, 1 in his left chest, and 1 in his right hand. Dr. Houston believed Mike would have died immediately from the shot to his eyebrow. The police found a rifle believed to be the murder weapon, which 2 of John's cousins identified as one they had loaned him in June to scare off dogs from his chickens. Authorities believed John had gone to the farm and killed the 2 women first, then shot 3-year-old Diane. After covering the woman with potato tops, he took Diane's body inside and placed it in her bed, where he later shot Micheline in her crib. Afterward, he waited for Mike to return, smoking a cigarette in the kitchen. When Mike came home, John shot him while standing on a chair. He then rummaged through the house, took his mother's money, which was later found on him when he was arrested, and drove away to Regina. The killings appeared to be premeditated, with several shots fired at close range. A neighbor named Alfred Matishuk testified that on the day of the shootings, he had been stooking for Mike roughly 600 yards from the house. Around 6:45 p.m., he saw Mike's car parked in its usual spot and later watched it drive out of sight on the number 15 highway. Walter Petlock and his wife, Gladys, also testified about their visit to John at the Regina jail after his arrest. Gladys recalled John saying, "If I could have controlled myself after the first shot, I would have been all right." Walter supported this, saying he warned John to stop because he didn't want to hear any more details about what happened. After hearing from many witnesses and reviewing all the evidence, including the chair and the blood-stained clothes of the victims, it was the defense's turn to present its case. Defense attorney Emmett Hall used a clever strategy. He argued that John shot Mike in self-defense. As for the other murders, John claimed he only learned about them from the newspaper while he was trying to evade capture. He insisted he had no idea that they had been killed. John Petlock took the stand in his own defense and shared his version of events. On the afternoon of the murders, he said he was stooking grain when he heard gunshots, so he went to the house to find out what was happening. As I approached the corner of the house, Mike came out holding a rifle. I asked him, "What's all that shooting about?" He got startled, looked around and shouted, "So you've come for some medicine too?" I replied, "What kind of medicine?" He then said, "I'm fed up with this already." Continuing his story, Petlock claimed, "He swung the gun toward me, and I thought he was going to shoot me, so I jumped and grabbed the rifle. He fired at me, but the bullet missed and went under my right arm." Petlock described a fierce struggle that moved through the farmyard until Mike tripped over a pile of onions and fell, pulling Petlock down with him. "I got up and tossed the gun away. Then, according to Petlock, Mike chased him around a chicken coop, threatening, 'You will die in these hands today.' Mike tried to grab the rifle again, so Petlock jumped on his back. I pulled the rifle from behind him while he was pushing against me. He charged at me like a bull and grabbed the rifle by the barrel. I tripped, and the gun went off, hitting him high." When asked if Mike then fell, Petlock said no. He came at me again, swinging his arms and yelling. All I could hear was, "Shoot some more, shoot some more." Oh God, I lost control. My head felt like it was on fire, so I fired 2 more shots into him. The next thing I knew, he was lying dead in front of me. Next, Petlock admitted he dragged Mike's body into the kitchen. I took his feet and tossed him over. He landed on his stomach. He then tried to clean some blood off his shirt and wiped away spots from the concrete step outside the kitchen. While exploring the house, he noticed it was messy but didn't see the children. He went outside and found a suitcase in Mike's car filled with clothes and a bundle of cash. The keys were missing, so he searched Mike's body for them before leaving. Petlock talked about the family arguments and how he was treated by his relatives. He said that most of the arguments with his mother after their father died were about his wife. Mother didn't approve of her job. He claimed his brothers, Mike and Ednot, made things worse by spreading lies to our mother. He denied asking his mother for the farm or for $5,000, saying instead he had offered to buy the home farm for that amount when it was suggested that, due to her age, she should move in with family. Under cross-examination, Petlock insisted he wasn't interested in the money he took and didn't know how much there was until the police counted it after his arrest. When shown pictures of Mike's body on the kitchen floor, he said it wasn't how he left it. When asked about the rest of the family's absence, he thought they were likely at a funeral or in town. However, he didn't deny that the heel print on the chair was his, explaining that he stood on it to fix a torn window blind. When Prosecutor Ross asked, "If you stood on the chair to shoot Mike as he entered, wouldn't that give you an advantage?" Petlock replied, "Yes, if that's how you want to put it." To support Petlock's story, his defense attorney, Dale Schneider, collected samples that looked like blood from the concrete steps and sent them for testing. The tests showed traces of human blood, but they couldn't determine how long it had been there. Sergeant Miner and Constable K. Murray and M.B. Toes conducted tests to see if the sound of a .22 caliber rifle could be heard with a strong wind blowing from the northwest on the Petlock farm. Their conclusion was that the shots could only be heard from a distance of about 1/10 of a mile. However, Ross argued that the wind charts used were not valid evidence because conditions might have been different in Yorktown compared to Fenwood. In his 2-hour and 40-minute closing statement to the jury, Hall urged them to carefully consider the evidence and determine if Mike was killed in the kitchen or outside. He stated that the police had formed their theory that Mike was killed in the kitchen and ignored other possibilities. According to Hall, even after a thorough search of the kitchen, they found no trace of the bullet that supposedly hit Mike's eyebrow, which would have exited somewhere. He pointed out police photos that showed a bunched-up mat and clothing around Mike's arms, which he argued indicated that Mike was not shot in the kitchen but was dragged inside afterward. 3 cartridge cases were found, 2 in the kitchen and 1 beneath the crib. Since the baby was shot 3 times, Hall asked, couldn't all 3 cases have come from her? He also noted that there was no dirt in the kitchen, even though the victims supposedly had soil on their hands and shoes after working in the garden. There was no dirt in Mike's car either. In Ross's closing statement for the Crown, he suggested that John Petlock had two motives for the crime: greed and revenge. He stated that while the defense implied Mike could have shot his own family, Mike had no reason to harm his children or wife. All evidence indicated that Mike was killed as he came home from work around 5:30 p.m. I argue he was shot the moment he stepped into the house, not in the yard, which the accused wants us to believe through his unbelievable and vague story. I assert that the accused, using his own gun, killed the people in the garden. Because Diane was a clever little girl who could have testified against him, she was shot and carried inside, then placed on her bed. Ross urged the jury to consider John's actions after the murders. He fled with his brother's car and his mother's money, used different names, and told many inconsistent stories. He noted that on the morning of the crime, there was a disruption in the ongoing legal battles between John and his mother, which likely pushed him over the edge. Finally, it was up to the jury to decide. Did John Petlock go to his mother's farm with the intent to kill and wipe out his entire family before waiting to ambush his brother? Or did he stumble upon a family tragedy, getting into a fight with the real killer and emerging as the survivor, all while seizing the stolen money and fleeing? Would Mike have had enough time to arrive home, murder his family, cover their bodies, and then engage in the struggle described by John if he left work at 5 p.m. and was estimated to have died at 5:30? If Mike came out of the house with the rifle, how could it be the one John had borrowed from their cousins earlier? What about Mike's cap and lunch pail lying next to his body? Did John move them there? The case went to the jury at noon on March 16th, 1956, and just 4 hours later, they reached a verdict. They found Petlock not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. They believed his story, but thought he had gone too far, given the number of shots fired. John was sentenced to 17.5 years of hard labor at Prince Albert Penitentiary. Judge Thompson noted the 6 months John had already spent in custody, his lack of a criminal record, and the family conflicts that preceded the killings. He assured John that good behavior could lead to a reduced sentence. As John left the courtroom, he was overheard saying, "Phew." John's defense attorney appealed the sentence, claiming it was too severe, but the appeals court upheld it. He was released from prison in January 1967 after serving 11 years of his sentence.